Welcome, everyone, to our webinar, Coping with the Emotional Impact of Cancer, and joining us to kick off Mental Health Week. A few of you are still coming in, but we'll get started just for the sake of time. My name is Jasmine McGowan, and I'm the Managing Director here at Save Your Skin Foundation, and I'll be your presenter this evening. I'm truly honored to welcome you to this special webinar. In a world where resilience and community support are paramount, we have joined together to address a topic close to the hearts of many, the emotional journey of those touched by cancer. Whether you're actively managing a cancer diagnosis or providing unwavering support as a caregiver or just navigating life as a cancer survivor, this event is designated with you in mind. We also want to extend a warm welcome to everyone who has been touched by cancer in some type of way. Your presence means everything to us. Throughout this webinar, we will embark on a profound exploration of the unique and emotional and psychological dimensions that accompany the cancer journey. Our distinguished speakers today include Dr. Sue Johnson, the founding director of the Ottawa Couple and Family Institute and the International Center of Excellence in Emotional Focused Therapy, David Craig, a co-founder and CEO of Gryth Health, who brings valuable insights from the world of cancer support, and finally, Lyanne Westie, a life skills coach offering her expertise to enhance our understanding of wellness throughout the cancer journey. We invite you today to engage, learn, and participate actively in this enriching and supportive discussion. By coming together today, we can empower ourselves and others on this challenging yet transformative cancer journey. Let's build resilience and create a lasting connection, because together we are stronger. Thank you again for being part of this meaningful event, and we're going to begin our journey now. So before we dive into the presentations, we do kindly ask everyone to be mindful of background noise, ensuring a smooth and distraction-free experience for all. During the presentation, please utilize the Q&A feature that is at the bottom of your screen if you have any questions that arise. Rest assured, presenters will address your questions at the end of the last presentation. In the event we can't cover all questions during the live session, we'll make sure to email you the response at a later date. For our French-speaking audience, we're excited to announce that a YouTube live premiere of this French webinar will be available in the next 6 days, providing an exclusive experience for all. Now, before we begin our webinar, I just want to let everyone know a little bit about our foundation. A few of you are new, a few of you don't know very much about Save Your Skin, but here at Save Your Skin, we are a patient-led organization dedicated to the fight against non-melanoma skin cancers, melanoma, ocular, and uveal melanoma through education, advocacy, and awareness initiatives across Canada. Save Your Skin Foundation provides a community of oncology patient and caregiver support throughout the entire continuum of care, from prevention and diagnosis all the way to survivorship. Now, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors whose generosity made this webinar possible. So those would be Bristol Myers Squibb, Immunocore, Merck, Pfizer, EMD Serono, Amgen, Sanofi, Novartis, and finally La Roche-Posay. Thank you for your support. Now, I know we're not here for me to keep talking the entire evening, so it is my honor to introduce Dr. Sue Johnson. Dr. Sue Johnson is the founding director of the Ottawa Couple and Family Institute at the International Center of Excellence in Emotionally Focused Therapy. She is the leading innovator in the field of couple therapy and adult attachment, and the primary developer of emotionally focused therapy, or EFT for short, which has demonstrated its effectiveness in over 35 years of peer-reviewed clinical research. In recognition of this, Sue has received numerous awards, including the Psychotherapy Networker's Lifetime Achievement Award, the APA's Family Psychologist of the Year Award, and finally, the Order of Canada. Her best-selling book, Hold Me Tight, which was released in 2008, has sold over 1 million copies and has been developed into a relationship education program, with both available in numerous languages. This program has been adapted for therapists to facilitate with specific groups, such as families with teens, families with adult children, and couples facing cardiac disease, and also into an online version for couples, which you can find it at holdmetightonline.com. As founding director of the International Center of Excellence in Emotional Focused Therapy, Sue trains counselors in EFT worldwide, providing guidance to over 90 affiliate organizations. Now, it is my honor, everyone, to present Dr. Sue Johnson.
Goodness me, Jasmine. I didn't know you were going to say all that. All right, jolly good. Hi, everybody. I'm going to talk today about something that concerns us all, which is how we deal with the blindsiding fear that comes along with this diagnosis. And we only have 25 minutes, so I'm going to try to hit what for me are the high spots, but I've also written all this out for you in a longer form, and Save Your Skin will give you a copy of all that, which I hope will be helpful to you. So I'm a melanoma patient. I have metastases, and I've been on tebentafusp from December of 2021. I've been very lucky to be stable, and I'm now looking at new kinds of treatments. So that's me, and I'm going to talk to you about my personal experience, hopefully with my psychological expertise sprinkled in. So I thought that when I got this diagnosis that it was all about coming to terms with the transitoriness of life and with dying. And then I realized that it was actually, the challenge was learning how to live, to daily live with ocular melanoma. And the greatest part of that challenge for me is facing what I call the demon. The demon is not the melanoma itself. It's the uncertainty and panic that peaks when I have scans, when I have to talk to a doctor. It's sort of waiting in the shadows to hijack me all the time. And because our human brains hate uncertainty, we want to be able to predict everything. When we are hijacked like this, our natural tendency is to catastrophize. And I do. So I'm just going to play with what this demon looks like, one of the same ways I deal with it. And I'm going to suggest to you one of the ways that we use in our therapy to help trauma survivors deal with fear, with debilitating fear. And this will be written out for you in the transcript, and you will be able to try this for yourselves. So what does this demon look like? Well, it's going to be a bit different from all of you, but my demon looks like, I know that tomorrow the big doctor from Toronto is going to call me about my scans. And as the sky darkens into evening, I recognize that the demon is coming for me. My back tenses, my stomach churns, the book I'm reading and all the appointments to next week seem completely pointless. I shrink, I get smaller, and a feeling of desperation and escape floods me. I want to crawl out into my bed and stay there forever. I want to walk out into the icy bay in the beach and in my house and let the waves take me. And I imagine saying to the doctor, I can't do this. I can't take this. I want out. I'm just simply not strong enough for this, right? And what comes up for me is I'm doomed. And I weep, and I have all kinds of terrible images coming up, and it feels like there's no way out. And the demon has won. I'm caught. I'm caught in the teeth of the demon. So I have realized over the last little while that living with this diagnosis is really being able to dance with the demon, to be able to see this fear, grapple with it, and end up feeling not overpowered, but stronger. That is a challenge. That is an ongoing challenge. I think I'm much better at it than I was a year ago. So we as human beings only have so many ways of dealing with debilitating uncertainty and fear. In psychology, we talk about that basically people go into fight, flight, and freeze. You know, they seem pretty obvious. The tricky part is that they're not enough. They're not useful enough. And we can get caught in any one of them, and they sort of take us over, and what feels like protection just becomes another kind of prison that keeps our anxiety humming along. So what else comes up? What is a good move about the demon? How can I shift my emotional state and find some kind of balance? Well, there are obvious things that you can find in the literature that I've found useful. One of them is exercise, pedaling like mad on my exercise bike, listening to Billy Joel or James Taylor. That makes me feel somehow powerful, and it brings me into the present. It brings me into the now, which is a big part of being able to deal with the demon. The demon's whispering to you about the future all the time. So dealing with the demon, I can sing, and there's a song by Jim Croce, I'll give you a feeling, that is called Working at the Car Wash Blues, where he's singing about having to work at the car wash. And the bit at the end says, I've got the steadily depressing, low down mind messing, working at the car wash blues. And I sit and sing on my bike and sing, I've got the steadily depressing, low down mind messing, ocular melanoma blues. And somehow when I get off the bike, I feel better. So we could talk about that a lot. Exercise releases endorphins, which is our brain's natural opium, etc., etc. But this makes me feel like I'm standing up to the demon. The other one is to meditate. And people have their own ways of doing that, and there's lots of different ways. It's basically, for me, it's slowing down and being still, and again, staying in the now. That helps me a lot. And the other one, the big one, and this is my work in psychology, is to find someone to confide in. In this case, it's usually my partner. And I can say something like, it's come for me. And he knows what I mean. And as he holds me and talks to me, we're wired for this kind of soothing. We're wired for this kind of survival. It's our main survival strategy, is to turn to another person and to feel safe in their arms. So I talk to him and I feel less overwhelmed. Some people use a spiritual figure. Some people use someone from their childhood to talk to. I'm aware that my main attachment figure when I was young was my father. And I'm never ceases to amaze me, because I write about this on a theoretical level, that there are times in my adult life when I can hear my father's voice in my head. And that voice is always telling me that I am strong enough and that I will find a way through. And I find that very comforting. So these things help. But I want to talk, because we have little time, about a way we have when we're working with trauma survivors of somehow taking this enormous catastrophic emotion and tying it down, making it more specific and concrete, more manageable, making the emotions themselves less scary. So in the therapy I do, which is called EFT, we call this affect assembly. You take your emotion apart, you put it back together. Okay, this gives you a feeling of control. So we say, we know emotion has 5 elements. There's a trigger, there's a general response. Oh, danger, terrible. There's a body sensation. I feel sick right now. There's thoughts, the things you tell yourself. I can't do this. There's action tendencies. I go and have 8 stiff drinks. That's the old English way of dealing with these kinds of problems that I grew up with as a child. Just go have 3 double scotches and you really don't care anymore. That has limitations, right? So when I find the demon of fear standing on my chest, I begin by taking a deep breath and going in and assembling it. And you can see this in your handout. To give you an example, it really helps to identify the trigger because it makes it specific, right? The trigger is a message on the OM Facebook page about treatments not working. Now, some days I could look at that and it's just information. Other days I look at it and it opens the door and the demon comes rushing in. Perception, alarm, alarm, this is dangerous. There's nothing I can do. I'm helpless. A body response, my stomach churns and I start to feel sick. My thoughts, I go to, I'm doomed. This is the worst thing that can happen to me. There's no way out. Life is a nightmare. Yeah. So action, I'm paralyzed. I'm paralyzed. I just go over these thoughts and thoughts in my head and I look for an escape. And I find myself caught on a wheel of alarm, nausea, catastrophic thoughts. And I just see that I'm caught with the demon and I'm dancing and I'm caught in the song that the demon is singing. So I look and I name each of these parts of the demon. I name them instead of just reacting to them. And let me tell you once this happens to me, last time this happened to me. So I say, first of all, I allow myself my response. I don't blame myself. I say, oh, this is perfectly understandable and natural and normal. We react this way because our brain's trying to protect us. And my body sensation is just my fear revving up my nervous system, reminding me that this is dangerous. And then I can say, oh, here's my thoughts. That's interesting. Well, life will end for all of us. That's always been true. But right now, the story I'm telling myself is that this is immediate, about to happen, inevitable, and will be terrible. This is a story I'm telling myself. This is not my immediate reality, like this glass is my immediate reality and I can drink. This is a story I'm telling myself that's taking me over. As I do this, I start to get a sense of balance, emotional balance. But I understand that I'm freaking out and that the story is that treatments fail and that nothing will work. And I totally forget the truth of the moment, which is you're alive right now. You don't know when death is coming for you. Nobody does. And you can either choose to let this drama take you over or not. So when I do this, I feel empowered. I stand up to the demon. It's like I'm saying, I will not let you take me over. I can slow down, look at this and take it apart. And that in itself is soothing. To give you another example, years and years ago, I was terrified of flying. I developed an airplane phobia, which was disastrous because I had to fly almost every weekend. And when I did this process for myself back then, I recognized with total surprise that I was not afraid of the plane crashing. I did not believe that the plane would fall from the air. That was not the trigger. So what was the trigger? The trigger was turbulence and the helplessness that came with it. And as I explored this and made sense of it, my airplane phobia got smaller and smaller, and I learned to trust myself that I could deal with what is basically rough air on a plane, right? So that was kind of a journey through that kind of fear. Okay, so I'd like to suggest that you can play with this and you get good at it. It feels weird in the beginning, but so does it with our clients in therapy. But when you get overwhelmed by what I'm talking about, you can stay specific and concrete. Put your finger on these elements. It's the word the doc said. That's what he said. How do I feel? I feel dizzy, so I can't concentrate. And what do I say to myself? My life is finished. Numb out, begin again. It's like a wheel, so you can stop the wheel. So this is something that we do in therapy that we find helps people a lot. We call it affect assembly. And I have gone through it very fast. I hope you will use your transcript. It will help you. And I've also left a page as a resource at the end of your transcript telling you things that books I found useful, and things like Tai Chi that I found useful, and a few quotes from my favorite Buddhist author called Jack Kornfield. One of my favorite is, he says, wisdom and courage are your birthright. They have been with you all along. They are in you now. When I trust this, all my fear slows down. One more I want to give you from the great violinist, Isaac Perlman. He's a violinist who's disabled by polio. It takes him quite a long time to get up on the stage. When a string broke in the middle of a key concert, he continued to play on the remaining 3 strings. And when somebody asked him about it, he said, sometimes it's your task in life to find out how much music you can still make with what you have left. I invite you to think about that your immediate direct experience is invariably different from your worst ideas about what this is about. And we can all stand up to the demon. And when we stand up to the demon, we still have melanoma, and it's still terrifying. And that's to be expected with human beings. But we don't have to be taken over by the fear. we can live the life we are given. We can live as much life as we have. And of course, when we feel empowered, we're better at dealing with this disease. We're better at taking care of our health. We're better at making good treatment choices. So I promised I would only do 20 minutes. And I think actually I've been pretty good, because you've probably noticed that I can talk and talk and talk. So I haven't done that. So Jasmine, I'm going to go back to you now.
Well, thank you so much for that presentation. And yes, we're just perfectly at 20 minutes. Well, I want to thank you again for joining us. And for those that are just joining in, feel free to type a question at the bottom at the Q&A section. So next up, we have David Craig. David is a two-time cancer survivor and was the caregiver to his wife throughout metastatic melanoma. Dave and Alice Emerson met through their shared passion for cancer advocacy to increase understanding and decrease shame and stigma. Alice's dream was to become an author, and her article, Life Like Before, was published in Months to Years just before her passing in April 2023. Dave is a co-founder of Gryth Health, which is an online platform that helps patients and caregivers navigate their health journey, support their peers, and change systems. Dave has a bachelor's degree in communication and an MBA in technology management from Rochester Institute of Technology. He has completed an executive education at Harvard Business School in building new ventures and MIT Sloan School of Management in corporate strategy. Now, everyone, I am going to introduce you and let David take over. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jasmine. I was so lost in Sue's story. Sue, you connected with me in my experience as a survivor, my experience as a caregiver, and the work I do in cancer support and advocacy. What you shared was just beautiful and so powerful.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to try to regain myself now because I was so lost in what you were sharing.
Okay.
And I really want to start by saying thank you to Save Your Skin. The team was really a part of our journey together. And, as we look back on things, we just realized the significant moments that help us endure really challenging and painful times. And I'm sincerely grateful to Save Your Skin Foundation for the support they gave me and us and everybody facing this journey. Sue, as you were talking, I was really reflecting on the key theme that I wanted to share in my opening comments. And I thought you really touched so much on the feeling of powerlessness, right? As these things are cast upon us, that feeling of powerlessness and helplessness can be overwhelming. And I know that in my journey through my own cancer diagnoses, as well as my journey as a caregiver, probably the hardest thing to deal with was just pure helplessness. And that's really what I wanted to focus on as I share some of the background to help understand how I've gotten to this point that I have, and then specifically how I've worked to really turn that powerlessness into feeling powerful and feeling like I can make an impact for myself and people that I love. And so I'll start at the beginning for me. I had my first cancer diagnosis at 25, and then a second one also in my 20s, two different primary cancers. And nobody ever equips anybody for any type of cancer journey. And it's almost like learning a new language in a new world none of us ever expected. I think when we talk about patient experience, we have to acknowledge that the word experience, when it comes to being a patient or a caregiver, is actually when life betrays us and our expectations. None of us expect to have a cancer diagnosis, and none of us expect to be the caregiver to someone going through theirs. And to me, these experiences are truly life sort of betraying what we thought we were setting out to do. And so that's how I felt in my 20s going through cancer. I changed my career through that to really focus. I'm a researcher by training. I wanted to really focus what I do in life, how I try to make a difference, to focus on patient experience, research, and education. And so my career for the last, almost 20 years has been helping to understand how we experience cancer and then how we develop support and interventions for patients and care partners. And I really felt like through the work that we do with Gryth, I was turning my feelings of powerlessness into regaining some control and some purpose because of those experiences. And it's through that work how I actually met my wife, Ellis, and she was going through a melanoma diagnosis. And we connected and formed a bond that was different than anything I had experienced before that. And she was in active treatment when we met. She got an all clear diagnosis. And we were in a relationship and thought we had a lot of the future to look forward to. She relapsed in the fall of 2021. And I have to be honest, the feelings of powerlessness that I felt as a patient, I felt even more significantly as a caregiver. And I know we always talk about, supporting caregivers and the burdens that caregivers face, but having been both a patient and a caregiver, I've never been more sensitive and committed to supporting care partners in this journey, because the specific experiences can be very, very different, but the demands and the impact on mental health and overall well-being can be profound, are profound. And so I wanted to share just sort of the moments that helped me turn that powerlessness as a caregiver into feelings of having more power. And I can honestly say it's the moments where people showed me how to start to talk in different languages, right? I couldn't approach being a caregiver as a patient. Being a caregiver is something very different. And just listening to individuals who talk about caregivers and have the experience helped me start to think of my identity as different than my own patient experience, but really my caregiver experience. And the work that we do with Gryth is really to help individuals navigate their journey, support our peers, and then change systems, advocate for change that helps more people at the systemic level. And we have three core values. They are authenticity, relentlessness, and advocacy. And those are a result of all of our personal experiences, Sue, right? Like our values come from what we live. And our authenticity, relentlessness, and advocacy really come from authenticity being learning how to talk about the things we never expected to, and almost always were never trained to how to talk about. And that means reaching deep inside of ourselves and confronting and exploring things we never thought we'd have to face. And relentlessness is so when you talk about the demon, standing in the face, relentlessly because of love for those we care about. That is the relentlessness, right? We have to be strong for ourselves, and together we can be even stronger. And that is where our relentlessness comes from.
I love that,
then,
David. I love that word, David. I love that. There's something that's right. I love it because, in our world, we're taught, oh, well, you just fix a problem, and it's done. It's just done. You just do it once and then it's fixed. And in fact, if you really want to deal with this one, you do have to be relentless, because the demon is wired in and he comes back, boy. And if you aren't going to be relentless, he's got you. So I love that word. Thank you.
It's what I go to every time I feel weak, Sue. How do I find it? And then strength always comes from being together. To us, advocating is being together with people who understand and support each other. And so those three values have helped me, navigate as an active caregiver, and then through my grief as a bereaved caregiver. And all of it has been with this focus to believe that by being relentlessness, we can overcome things that we never thought we would have to face,
Yes.
And I will never minimize the feeling of powerlessness or how scary the demon can be. But by being, in groups like this and with individuals like you and the Save Your Skin Foundation and the audience here with us, and by being together, we can turn the truly impossible things into being more possible. And so I know that we have some questions that have been come in already before. I'm sure that we have lots of things Sue and I can banter back and forth, but I want to stop there, Jasmine, and see if that's a good point to turn to questions or any prompts we want to get into.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for telling your story and sharing with us. We do have one final panelist before we jump into our questions. So, Lyanne Westie, who is a life skills coach. For the past 20 years, Lyanne has been working in small business management, the first decade in financial industry and the last in a restoration industry. Lyanne has a passion for numbers, systems, and the dynamic process of growing a business. And during the past year, Lyanne has moved away from small business management to follow her greatest passion, which is fostering mind-body wellness. Having her own medical challenges and two young boys with medical challenges, this has ignited her commitment to understanding how we best support ourselves while navigating the medical system. Lyanne completed her undergrad in psychology and worked on her master's in family studies. In addition to working with Save Your Skin Foundation, Lyanne works in energy healing as a trained practitioner in Reiki and heart resonance and complete cellular mind-body alignment. So Lyanne isn't with us today, but we do have her recording, and I will play it for you all now. Again, if you have any questions, please put them at the bottom of the Q&A box.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for having me here tonight. And my name is Lyanne Westie, and I am a wellness coach, and I work as a support with Save Your Skin Foundation to help with some self-care resources. And so today I am going to be talking to you about mindfulness and self-care and how these two things can go together to support you in putting some self-care resources together and building a self-care toolkit. So what I am going to speak to you about tonight, and so my intention for this evening is to look at what is mindfulness, what is self-care, how do mindfulness and self-care work together. We're going to explore mindfulness and self-care at a couple of different levels of distress. So I'm going to bring in a metaphor, and we'll look at how self-care and mindfulness might look differently in different experiences. And throughout that, there will be some reflective questions. And again, knowing that this is a presentation, a little bit different than in peer groups where we can check in with each other around these questions and really have a chance to hear from others about what they're already doing or what they might be using, and to gain some ideas from our peers. But I will ask those questions throughout for an opportunity for you to check in maybe yourself, what's there for you. So going to move on to mindfulness. So this is the definition from Jean Kabat-Zinn. Mindfulness is defined as paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So we're able to pay attention. We're choosing, there's some agency to this, that we're choosing to be present. We're sort of focusing on purpose on a particular item or in a particular way. And we're doing that without judgment. And I always like to add the caveat there that that doesn't mean we're not having thoughts that are judgmental in nature. It's that we're observing and allowing what is there, even if it is thoughts that are frustrating or thoughts of judgment, or even thoughts that are coming up, I'm not good enough, this isn't happening, this is disappointing, that those thoughts can be there and that we can meet those without judgment. So we're not adding that extra layer to what we're already experiencing. And so essentially the practice of focusing on the present moment. And this image, I absolutely love this image to capture exactly that. Our minds can take us to so many places. You see this sort of bubble of what can go on in our minds and in our thoughts, and then the emotions that connect to those thoughts. So much can go on here and can draw us into that bubble. And yet there are things happening in the present moment that are right in front of us. And the needs we have, we want to be able to meet what's happening in the present moment as well. So again, this difference between what's happening in our minds and what's happening in front of us, and how can we be with what's happening in the present moment so that we can meet the needs of that present moment. And so that brings me to self-care. Again, this connection between self-care and mindfulness. And self-care is the ability to promote health, prevent disease, maintain health, and to cope with illness and disability with or without the support of a healthcare provider. The goal of self-care, again, to prevent or control disease and preserve overall well-being through the consistent act of taking care of various aspects of one's own life. So these things that we're putting in place that support us throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout time, that are helping us to preserve, to maintain, to prevent, to control the things that are going on in our life. And the other tool that, or the other term that you'll hear me use here is self-care toolkit. And this is a collection of resources, skills, and practices that you keep on hand that can help you to feel better and navigate life stressors. So this process of building a toolkit, building resources and skills that we can bring with us and to the present moment and to the situations that we find ourselves in to support ourselves as we navigate difficult experiences and pleasant experiences. And so that brings me to the space of how these come together. And so mindfulness, the piece that I really is important to share in the space of self-care is that mindfulness, like a muscle, is strengthened by use. And the intentional practice of mindfulness strengthens our ability to shift to mindfulness in reactive moments. And I loved, and I'm not sure if you can see me on the screen, but my instructor in mindfulness, he explained it as an actual muscle. So you can imagine, and I brought this image of this bubble back onto the screen again here, is that our mind can take us to all these places. And he imagined it almost as a muscle, right? That our mind can take us out. And mindfulness is that curl back to bring us into the present moment. And so, you know, all day long in pleasant situations and stressful in our day-to-day, our mind and all those thoughts can take us out. And mindfulness is this practice of bringing it back to the present moment for what is here right now. What are we experiencing? How can we be present with it and a support for it? And that being with what is then allows us with self-care tools, strategies, resources, practices, skills to meet the needs that we have. And a couple of the pieces that I want to reflect on here as we look at some of the self-care toolkits, some of the self-care tools, that self-care tools are unique to the individual, that they may differ by event or experience, and they may change over time. So how do we find the tool that's going to support us most? What are those specific to us? We might hear from others what works for them and might be curious to explore that and see how that fits. You know, but essentially really coming into that present moment and what do we need and how do we find the supports for that present moment? And then some questions to keep with us as we move forward with mindfulness and self-care and how these two come together. So what do I really need right now in this moment? What tools do I already have in place that are working? What new tools might be available and who could I check in with and talk to learn about those? And when can I practice using the tools I've chosen to use? Okay, so some questions that we'll keep through the rest of the presentation. And so what I wanted to do, and this is, excuse me, in general, speaking in general, is look at some of the different spaces. So in this, you know, the movement, this is not someone's specific chart of emotional movement, but between calm and distressed, excuse me, moments where we feel calm, moments where we might be feeling moderate distress, and then moments where we might find ourselves really in distress, reactive, pushing that window of what we can tolerate, and how self-care might be, the self-care tools we might use would look different in each of those spaces. So, and we're going to keep in mind accessibility of mindfulness in that moment, reactivity or response. Are we in reaction? Can we find a way back to response? And then self-care, what tools are you already using and what new tools might be available? And so we're going to look at each of those spaces with a little bit of metaphor. So coming into the first, we're going to start way up at the top and make our way back down. So the first space that I wanted to look at, and again, speaking in general, so this is not speaking unique to your experience or what you might be experiencing right now, but just really pulling back out and speaking in general around feelings of distress and what we can tolerate and where we find ourselves as we push closer to that window of tolerance. So in this space of distress, and what the metaphor that I brought in to sort of bring to mind that feeling of urgency is a moment where you might come into a room and you find that there is a pipe that's burst and there's water spraying everywhere, right? So you come into that room, and I apologize if you're going through a burst pipe in your home right now. I do not want to bring up strong emotions, but it seemed like the most fitting that in that moment you're standing there. There's volume. It's happening. We're in reactivity. We're just, all we want to do in that moment is to stop that water and to slow it down. And we, again, in that reactive, when you might be reaching for what you can find in that moment. And again, if this is your first time coming across a pipe like this and there is no tools available, it's going to be really difficult to walk down to the garage, sort through the tools, come back to fix that. And so in self-care, again, talking about how can we make sure we have that toolkit in place, excuse me, right from the beginning. So can we develop tools, develop resources, so that if we were to come in and find ourselves in one of those moments of high reactivity, in high distress, that we've developed a toolkit and we're bringing tools that we can use to start right away, bringing down, slowing down, to bring us to that moment where we can meet the need that's coming up. So to bring ourselves back down into a space where we can navigate and we're not feeling so reactive. And so the question again in this space, what tools are you already using? Okay, so this, to me, that toolkit, what's already there? What are you using? What do you notice in those moments where you're really feeling heightened or distress that you go to, that you know you can use, that you can bring back to mind that you may have used in the past? And then what tools might be available to you? And I'm not going to go into these in full detail, but some possible options for this space. We'll start with connection. So connection being, excuse me, someone you could call, someone you might be able to text, someone that you can be in direct connection with. That might be a peer group online, that might be a Facebook group, somebody where you feel safe to be supported by, that you can connect with and talk to, that might support you to come back into alignment or slow down. Mindfulness, I put mindfulness here, but it really is embedded in all of them, that many of the mindfulness practices, most of the mindfulness practices are designed to bring us back into the present moment. So grounding, containment, breathing practices, remembering that there's breathing practices that activate us and bring energy to us, and there's breathing practices that slow us and calm us. So being clear on breathing practices that would be supportive in this scenario that might bring us down, slow us, bring us back to calm. Tactile or sensory, things that we can touch, things that we can bring ourselves into the present moment, certain techniques that you can use to slow and calm. And then movement, maybe that is quick movement or sudden movement, maybe that, or sorry, quick movement or movement to burn off energy, or maybe that is about sitting still and calming and slowing. And then, and so how we can find the tools that will match so that you can support what you need in that moment to move into a space of response. The next space that I wanted to look at, and we'll look at quickly again in the same lens, is this space of, I'm feeling already, there's some distress here, feeling a bit heightened, and the metaphor, keeping with this metaphor, that there's a little hole in the pipe and it's already frustrating. We want to make sure that it doesn't end up in a a big explosion of water again. And coming back to emotions that already may be feeling frustrated, something's happened or something's come in or thoughts come in, and it has the potential to take us up into further distress. And so what self-care tools might we be able to use, and what might be available to us in a moment like this, that we can be present with what's happening, sorry, be present with what's happening, and bring the self-care tools that will help to meet us in this moment. And again, in this moderate space, maybe not as reactive, there feels like there's a bit more time and a bit more space to respond and to check in. What tools am I already using? What do I need here? Maybe a bit more time or spaciousness. And then what tools might be available? And you'll see many of the same tools here, and maybe just how you're using them is a little bit different. So connection, again, reaching out to someone else, mindfulness, grounding, breathing practices, again, specific breathing practices that you find supportive, that you're able to practice, movement-based support, writing. So this might be a space of writing or journaling or expressing through writing or creativity, a containment practice, again, helping to externalize what we're looking at so that we can look at it a little bit differently, tactile or sensory, or even sound. So this might be a space where you bring in sound or guided meditation or support in this space. And then one last space that I wanted to look at, and this was a really important piece that sometimes for myself, I speak for myself, that goes unnoticed and really does take mindfulness in these spaces, is these moments of calm. It's a really great book, and it's called Hardwiring Happiness, and it's by Dr. Rick Hansen. And it's about the mindfulness of being present with those calm moments, those present moments, those moments of positive interaction or peacefulness, and really exploring them. And sometimes those moments, we can just skip over them, right? We have a positive conversation with someone, it was a really great interaction, and we move forward, and it sort of goes off our radar. And one of the amazing and wonderful things about mindfulness is really being present with the positive moments, the spaces where we're feeling calm, where we can check in, reflect on, wow, that was really positive. I notice a softness, I notice a gentleness. Oh, there's stillness here. And we're really taking the time in those moments to explore and bring presence to and bring mindfulness to. And I see them almost as these landing spots where we've given ourselves the opportunity to explore it and expand on the time that we're in that moment of calm and presence. And that then there's this sort of landing point that when we find ourselves in, it's always frustrating, it's always angering, it's always upsetting, I'm always in pain. There's sort of these bigger spaces where we can reflect on, actually, I had this positive moment. Actually, there was stillness here. Actually, I am experiencing stillness right now. So really connecting to those places of calm and exploring them with the same curiosity and space that we might when we're upset. So again, responsiveness in those calm moments, mindfulness often more accessible and also encouraged to be more mindful in those moments. What tools are you using when you're feeling present and you're feeling calm, right? What self-care are you doing? Are you feeling able to go out and maybe have tea with someone? Are you finding that you might feel more able to take part in the project that you're excited to work on? So what tools are you already using in those spaces? And then what tools are available to you? Mindfulness, same ones again, mindfulness, connection, grounding, breathing, movement, writing and creativity, sound. And is this a space where you can practice using those skills going forward? And so that brings us to the end of this presentation, and a couple questions, again, that might be supportive as you're building this toolkit. What's in your self-care toolkit? What tools are you already using? Are they working? What new tools could you add? Will you use them? Are you able to spend time with them? Are you likely to use them? And where can you learn about additional tools? Are there peer groups? Are there mental health professionals you could speak to develop some new tools? And so thank you so much for this opportunity to share with you about two, what I believe to be very important aspects of wellness, which is mindfulness and self-care. Thank you so much.
Amazing. I want to thank all our panelists for presenting. We are now opening the floor to questions from the group. Reminder, you can type a question on the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And if we can get to everyone's questions, we'll make sure to respond to you via email at a later date. So before we jump right into this, I am going to stop sharing the screen so we have our panelists in full display. But I am going to be doing this Q&A section with my colleague, Taylor, Taylor is our Director of Special Projects. I just wanted to do a quick introduction before she starts reading some of your questions. We are going to read most of these questions anonymously, just for everyone's discretion. But again, feel free to put in some more questions there when you're ready. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we're going to have all of us here on the call. So one of the first questions we got in was, how do we balance gratitude for being here, the survivor's guilt for others that have passed, and the fear of our own journey with cancer? I would love to see how you guys would answer this, because as a survivor myself, I find that guilt exists almost constantly. So David, Dr. Sue Johnson, how would you approach that?
What an interesting question. I guess one way I have is that if I feel guilty, you know, we're great perfectionists, and we always feel, especially if we love somebody, that we're supposed to be able to take all their pain away, which of course we can't, and you know, sort of move them into what we want them to feel, which is joy, and we can't always do that. And even with some of my friends right now, one of my friends is very sick, and some part of me's been saying things like, well, why do you feel sorry for yourself? Well, get over it, Johnson, because you know there's your friend very sick, and so you can do all this. But I think what saves me a bit is that how you think about how they would want you to feel. How they would want you to feel. My friend who's very sick is the most loving person, and I think she would want me to feel grateful for the moments that I have, and to feel grateful, you know, for my life. And she would want me to do that. So it's, you know, we all inevitably, we're human beings. These suffering will come from us, uncertainty will come. But in fact, most of us, most of the time, unless we're caught in rage, want other people to feel joy and happiness. And I think there's also some sort of spiritual element here, which is that I live on the west coast of Canada, which is the most beautiful place on the planet. And if you look out the window sometimes, you just look out the window, and there's something in you, in your heart, that says, hey, if you don't have gratitude for this right now, you are really lost. Never mind about the story about the future and what can happen, and bad things will happen. Life is trouble. But, you know, this is your birthright to feel gratitude here for being alive and for having your day. It's your birthright, and the people who love you would want you to feel it, I think. What do you think, David?
I'm trying to transition to listening from you to sharing my thoughts.
Oh, okay.
No, I think what you both shared is that we can't avoid pain, and it's actually not the purpose of life. Avoiding pain actually creates new pain. And I read a book recently that said something like, how do we actually find pain that fuels our purpose and our sense of meaning? And if we think about things in terms of being things we really want to face and want to find courage through, it creates purpose in that pain. And the word grief, Jasmine, you mentioned, you know, how do we cope with grief? To me, grief is not one thing. It's never one thing. Grief is the loss of what we thought was going to happen, or it's the pain we're feeling now, or it's, you know, sadness over seeing somebody suffer, whatever it is. And Sue, I know you mentioned in your opening remarks, how do we separate those things, right? How do we sort of know what each thing is so that we can focus on it? And I know for me, part of my finding purpose has been not learning how to not get overwhelmed by grief in its totality, but saying, here's where I'm focused now. Here's where I'm focused now. Self-care is where I'm focused now. And then that way grief becomes more like these slivers that we can hopefully make an impact with.
That's very profound what you're saying, David, because, you know, I study emotion a lot and how people change and how people get stuck. And some of the latest research on emotion which makes total sense to me, is that if you look at the people who can really cope with difficult emotion, the people who are really resilient, right, and we all have the ability to do this at least sometimes, they make things specific. You know, they literally, our brains aren't designed. I always think this is the problem with climate change. Hey, aren't you scared about climate change? Yes, I'm overwhelmed, so don't tell me about it. I don't want to think about it. Right? It's too big. It's like, I can't do anything about that. But if you notice, a few years ago, we found out that there was a hole in the ozone layer. Oh, there's a hole in the ozone layer. Right. Well, what's causing it? Let's do something about it. And we did. So it's like specifics, you know, our brains can deal with specifics, and some of it is just stopping this hugeness that happens in catastrophizing, where, you know, I can't deal with melanoma. Well, actually, you do, Sue. You deal with the interview with the doctor, and sometimes you come home real mad. And sometimes you come home relieved, and sometimes you come home scared. But basically, you know, there's no interview with the doctor. You know, there's this specific moment, and that brings, you know, the speaker before me talked about grounding. That brings grounding down. Your grounding is what's in front of my face right now. What am I dealing with right now? And that makes things doable. So I think being specific is really important. And yes, that's right. Grief is a whole bunch of things. Grief can be rage at the person you love leaving you. You know, it doesn't have to be reasonable. You know, it can be, you know, powerlessness, right? It can be tons of things. It just shows up in different ways. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much to both of you. And thank you both for incredible presentations, and Lyanne from afar as well. I will take one of the live questions because we want to make sure that these ones get answered for everyone here. So an attendee asked, what is the best way to deal with the reality that many treatments for melanoma, this person being a melanoma patient, are available, but not all of them are accessible in Canada, and the frustrations that can come with that?
Yes. I think that is a real issue, and I think the limitations of our overburdened and overwhelmed health system, for most patients I know, really adds to our anxiety, and some of this can be helped by talking to people. For example, I feel like I've had to fight and advocate for myself for treatments in Canada. Okay, when I first got put onto Bentisap, it was available in Toronto only. And that was bureaucracy. That was pure bureaucracy. That was interprovincial and interhospital, and it was just bureaucracy. And so, you know, I was told you have to go to Toronto. So I had to live in Toronto in the middle of the winter, in the middle of shutdown COVID, and in the middle of the truckers. I can't tell you how difficult that was. And melanoma was only a small part of it. So yes, this is an issue. You have to advocate. And some part of my brain says you should not have to advocate when you're in this position. But unfortunately you do. And what we did was, lots of people don't know that Jefferson University, which is the big expert in melanoma, has something called a case review. And you can send your case in. It's a lot of work. You have to send in slides and scans, and you can send your case to Jefferson University, and their team will look at it and they will recommend a treatment for you. And we did that. And Jefferson University was very clear. They said if Sue was with us, this is what we would do. And that was not what the people in Toronto suggested. And at first, there was all kinds of stuff about how, well, you can't do that because you live in BC, and BC government will not pay for you to have this basically Jefferson treatment in Toronto, which is the only place it's available. My response to that which I wouldn't have done 2 years ago, was, yes, they will. They'll pay. They will most definitely pay. Okay. So please don't tell me that. That is not your decision to make anyway. Your decision is to request that the BC Cancer Society look at this and approve it. And I'm going to assume they are going to approve it because I'm a Canadian citizen and this is the only way I can get this treatment. It's not available here. And there were really, to be honest with you, there were crazy arguments put in my way, crazy, bureaucratic, nonsense arguments. Like, if we're going to pay for this in Toronto, you have to give us all this high level of research to prove that it works. Are you joking? I've got ocular melanoma. There is no high level of research. Let's get serious here. Just cut this baloney, okay? And that helps me say that because I'm a researcher and I know that they're talking baloney. So unfortunately, yes. Unfortunately, our system is just overwhelmed and you have to fight. Right at the beginning of my cancer journey, I had to fight because they told me, we're not going to make any treatment decisions on you until you have this special biopsy. And we have no idea when you'll be given that in Canada, in BC. You have no idea? No, we have no idea. We don't know when you'll get this. Are you joking? No, we're not joking. Right, I'm going to Seattle. I went to the best cancer hospital, Fred Hutch in Seattle, and the cancer specialist there said, come down here. We'll assess you one day and we'll do the biopsy the next day and we'll send it the next day to your hospital. They did that. It was impressive, okay? I'm not sure if I had just said, oh dear, I don't know what to do. I think I would have been waiting months for anybody to make any real movement. As it was, I got put onto Bentasap about 6 weeks later. So unfortunately for Canadians, you're right. The system is not geared for you. We are strange and rare. I'm the only person on Bentasap in my city. The nurses all laugh because they put the infusions on basic all the time and they tell me, you're so basic, Sue, right? Which they think is hilariously funny. So that's right. And the only way I know around that is to advocate. And people like Ocumel Canada and Save Your Skin are the most amazing advocates. And I knew that if things really came push to shove, that Kathy would be in there, and she's a powerful lady, that Kathy would be in there with the BC Cancer Board saying, excuse me, what do you mean you won't pay for this treatment? But it's hard. It's hard and it's not fair. And it's the way it is right now. Hopefully it will change. But, I have had discussions with my local oncologist, which degenerated into a lack of politeness. Let's just put it that way. Because, it's some of the in this Fred Hutch Cancer Center in Seattle, in every room, there was a huge thing on the wall in a frame. It said, this is all about the patient's needs, and the patient's needs come first. Well, I think in Canada, we don't have the resources for that. We have wonderful, well-meaning, incredible doctors and health staff, but we don't have the resources for that. And that is, I don't know what to say. I hope that at the next election, we all walk in the streets and say, if you don't have good healthcare, you don't have anything. If you don't have, never mind housing, that's important, but it doesn't matter where you live if your healthcare doesn't work. And by the way, our health is free. Oh, is it? Would you buy a bus that doesn't work at all if somebody told you it was free? No, you'd say, no, I won't buy that bus. Free, we've paid for it in our taxes. Sorry, I'm ranting, Taylor. You just touched a very sore spot. Our healthcare system isn't free. We all pay for it. It's inefficient. It doesn't work. It's full of bureaucracy. I can't get my scans sent from BC to Toronto without the most enormous hassle, and it'll take 2 weeks. Well, Toronto needs it in 3 days. Tough, and why not? Because you have forms and you have rules and you have to this and you have to send it here and then you have to send it there. And what are you talking about? This is our system. We're stuck with this system, and we need to all get together and do something about it.
Absolutely.
So sorry, Taylor, that was a rant. You didn't ask me for a rant, but yes, it's true and it's awful, and it's the reality here.
It was a very accurate rant. Dave, do you have anything to add?
Accurate rant. Accurate rant. Never mind. Okay, yeah.
This is not my specific area of expertise, but I will share a moment that changed my life that connects to this. And so I remember how much for me these questions were overwhelming and trapped inside. And so I didn't know how to talk about treatment. I didn't know how to talk about quality of life. I personally had 2 reproductive cancers. And so I didn't know how to talk about fertility or sexual performance or any of these things that we're often faced with a diagnosis. And I was at a conference after hiding all of that for 8 years and not talking about any of it. This might be inappropriate, but Sue, we're here to be inappropriate anyway. So I'm going to go forward. And so I was at a conference and I saw a woman, her name is Melinda Hood, and she was walking around with a plushie of a reproductive system. And she was saying, this one's not going to kill me. This one's not going to kill me, because she's a cervical cancer survivor. And in that moment, she took something, my shame over my reproductive cancer, and made it something to talk about.
Yes.
And and whatever area it is, whether it's how unequitable access to treatment is, or how challenging mental health can be, whatever area, seeing somebody give a way to talk about it, for me, was life-changing. And Sue, I thought you talked about something beautifully that's, frustrating and unfair and wrong, but let's talk about it because somebody's finding solutions.
Yes. And unfortunately, the solution I found was to go to the US. And it's interesting because even my friends, some of me want to feel guilty about that. Some of them want me to feel guilty about that. I do not feel guilty at all, at all, at all, at all. And I learned a lot. And just to give Canadians a perspective, the doctor that I've seen in Seattle twice, who just did a consult with me and who then helped me get this biopsy, I'm not one of his active patients. He's very busy. I've known him for 18 months. He calls me about once every 4 months and asks me how I am. He proactively calls me and asks me if there's anything he can do. Now, this is because this doctor isn't stressed out of his mind. He's not overwhelmed. He's not burned out. He's not dealing with an unsupportive system. But just imagine that, folks. Imagine that kind of availability. He gives me his home phone number. What? What? Yes, he does. And all this, I may never see him again in my treatment journey, but just thinking about him gives me a hit of security, because he has the time to care and he has the resources to care. And he's always said to me, if you're really stuck, Sue, if you're really stuck and you can't get a treatment up there, you come down here. And the image we have is that the US is gouging us for money. I wish to tell Canadians, my experience of that is it's not true at all. And they're very concerned about how much money you pay. They care that you're going to have to pay, and that everything I've received down there has been not reasonable, cheap. So, hey, Canadians, we got to get together and have a big fight here. That's what I think about this one. So there you go.
On that note.
Yes, on that note, yes. Sorry, Jasmine, that wasn't what we weren't supposed to get into this. Yes,
it's okay. I do have a question for you guys, and I'd love to hear both of your perspectives on this. The question was, what are the consequences of postponing care of mental health? What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Very good.
Big question, yes.
It's a biggie.
I think the question just exploded my mind.
Oh,
Um, I uh, I'm gonna take apart the words. Um, Mental health is a big word that encompasses a lot of things, and in reality, what we're talking about is what might be the little things that we can do to address things before they become big and overwhelming things. And so reading a book that helps me calm or center myself, or just walking outside in nature. So I love that you talk about being outside in the view. Those little things for me are as helpful in my mental health as many other things. And so it took me a long time, 8 years, just to be able to talk about anything I went through. And then as I've gone through more things as a melanoma caregiver and in the work I do with cancer patient research and education, just taking the time to sit with a book in the morning before the sun comes up, or to take a walk outside when I can feel the sun on my face, those things to me are so therapeutic. And they can take, again, like these big words, grief, mental health, and just make them slivers of action. And so I don't know if you relate to that too, but to me, it's those things, those little things can be as big as any big thing.
I agree with you. I think we live in a society where we're still into, just push it aside. And, I come from an English working class culture where the answer to everything is have a cup of tea. If everyone knew the world was going to end right now, the British would say, oh, I'll put the kettle on, have a cup of tea. And there's a certain charm and sense about that, but actually it's kind of dumb because, having a cup of tea isn't actually going to work there. I agree with you, but I think people don't put their mental health first. And in the end, what you have when you're fighting a demon or coping with huge issues is you have you. And whether you have your sense of control and power. And I think we don't help people deal with that enough. Like, relationships, I'm considered a relationship expert, whatever that means. We don't help people take care of them. I give you a good example. In the middle of something was happening a few months ago, which was very difficult for me, I realized that I was feeling very cut off from one of my children. And that this was actually disturbing me, disturbing my sleep. I was having imaginary conversations with this person, but I'd never actually spoken to them about it. So here I am, relationship expert. I'm not. So I turned and said to my kid, which wasn't easy, you know what, it maybe it's not reasonable and not fair, but somehow in the last few months, I feel really abandoned by you. I feel abandoned. I feel like you're a long way away. And you don't call me and ask me how I am. You assume I'm fine. And then I tell you I'm fine. And somehow I feel like we're losing our connection and I feel abandoned. And this my kid said, and then we have this conversation, right? But I could so easily have said, oh, don't say that, don't. Well, it's taking care of the bond and taking care of noticing when you do the affect assembly, what are the triggers and what are these triggers about? And lots of times the triggers aren't actually about the melanoma. They're about your particular vulnerability, right? Which is, we all have our sensitivities. I'm sensitive to different things than you are. And it helps to say, right, I do have that sensitivity. And what's the best way I have of dealing with that? So I think feeling entitled and knowing that we have to take care of our mental health, and that mental health either enables us or cripples us in itself. If I'm feeling mentally and emotionally strong, I can cope with what the doctor says to me. I can question him. I know questions occur to me, right? I can cope, right? If I'm feeling small and helpless, I can't cope with anything. Everything's overwhelming, and that includes the whole of treatment. And, I forget to take my vitamins, and I, forget my medical appointment, and because I'm lost. So mental health really important. We have to take care of it. It's our basic toolbox in this fight. And we need it. We need it. All the research says actually that resilience in any kind of trauma is about a competent sense of self that can make sense of your inner world and your ability to turn and reach for others. That's what creates resilience. Not the movies, the Rambo movies, which is looking at yourself in the mirror every day and telling yourself, God, you're worth it, and pretending you're strong as hell. And why do we have those silly things? God, you're worth it. I just look at those ads and think, no, I'm not. I don't want to be worth this new, soap or something, right? But yeah, we have to make it a priority. It's the ground we stand on.
May I share something else?
Of
Sue
course.
just spoke. So, Sue, what you said resonated so much to me because our brains try to make us focus on something else, right?
Yeah.
So it might not even be the mental health, or sorry, it might not even be the diagnosis. Our brain is, obsessing or spiraling about something completely unrelated, but that's the control thing. And the way you worded that question is, I feel abandoned. And I've found that when I find the courage to say, I feel alone or I feel hurt instead of you're doing something to me, it's super awkward the first time or maybe the second time, but I have people in my life now that we talk like that. And so I just have moments when I say, like, I don't know how to say this and I'm going to be embarrassed to admit it, but here's how I feel, and people in my life now are like, oh, okay, well, let's talk about that. And then it opens up a conversation. And I typically end up learning more about them and more about what I was actually afraid of than if I had just held it all in. And I just
Yeah.
think it was so smart that you said that.
And the research says that our main way in this society of dealing with difficult things was just try and suppress them, push them away, pretend they don't work. It's a terrible strategy, okay? It's just a terrible strategy. When you try to suppress things, I want you to think that you're literally pushing it down. And that takes energy and effort and obsesses you. And you push it down. But the natural thing in our emotions is it rebounds. And when it rebounds, you're even more sensitive to what you were pushing down than the first time. And you're just caught in this push it down, avoid. And then people do all kinds of terrible negative things, like, cut their arms and take drugs in order to keep pushing down these emotions. Well, mental health says, no, find a safe place to feel them, find a way of being able to focus on them and make them specific. And then you find, oh, I'm actually stronger and more competent than I thought. Oh, look at that. I don't actually disintegrate when I let myself feel this fear. I say, I'm afraid. Here comes the demon. Right. Okay. Jolly good. That's why I say now. A year ago, I was, more taken over and it was faster. But yeah. And I can't remember what the question was. It was so interesting talking to you, David.
Well, I do have another question, and it actually is a good segue talking about control. So the next question is, how do we positively deal with feelings of grief or anger when we're going through the cancer diagnosis and treatment process and when we feel like we have no control in our lives?
That's a huge one too. There's lots of elements in there. No control is the human being's nightmare. No control is our brain's hotspot. And your brain really says, you have to predict and you have to control. Your brain's a prediction machine. It hates uncertainty. So no control is absolutely triggering for everybody. And just recognizing that, how hard it is. And this is one of the reasons I put some Buddhist books in the resources. What something like Buddhism says is control is an illusion anyway. We don't like to know that, but here I am obsessing about, oh my God, these treatments don't work. In fact, I could drive my car and be hit by a bus tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock, and that's the truth. But we don't want to know that. So Buddhism talks about the fact that control is illusionary And really the only safety, and this comes from our work, is knowing you're vulnerable, accepting you're vulnerable, and looking around for positive ways to deal with that. Ways like, well, I am vulnerable, but my partner loves me and is there for me right now. And actually, since this cancer diagnosis, our relationship has deepened. And I know in a whole new way that when my partner says to me, I've got you, this means something totally different now than before my cancer diagnosis, okay? And those 3 words, I've got you. We are wired to long for that reassurance when we feel in danger. And those 3 words, I can feel them changing my nervous system. My nervous system goes, ah, okay, which when you really think about it is completely crazy. They're just 3 words. But so I think recognizing your vulnerability and your powerlessness is the first step, not trying to deny it or run away from it, and recognizing it hurts and it's terrifying. And then turning to other people, turning to, since I've been meditating more, I have somehow a quiet part of me whose voice I didn't even recognize. Okay, for a while there, I started to have this voice, and I thought, "What's going on? What the hell? Something's who's talking to me? I don't know who's talking right now." And I've just started to recognize, oh, this is the calm part of me. This is the little child part of me is scared, and this is the adult calm part of me that has dealt with all kinds of things in my life. And I listen to that voice, and the voice tells me something that calms me down. So I think we all have that capacity, but dealing with uncontrollability and vulnerability, that is if you didn't have that question, incredible person who sent that in, we wouldn't need mental health field. That's the whole ball of wax in dealing with life. We don't want to know that we're vulnerable, but we are. And I find perspectives like Buddhism and the books of people like Pema Chodron, who's our great Canadian Buddhist nun, right, out in Nova Scotia, I find them helpful because they basically say, this is the way it is. We all pretend it's not true, but this is the way it is. And if you're a cancer patient, it suddenly comes in your face in a way that it's very hard to deny. And, we all know that there are people we can talk about our cancer and our melanoma, and there are people who don't want to hear it. Some people say, how are you doing? And perfectly well, they want you to say, fine, I'm fine. So you say that. And there are other people who you can say, well, I had a hard morning. I have to go talk to my oncologist, and I always come out of there enraged. So that's just me. I'm kind of weird. So I said, I had a hard morning. So, well, what did you do? Well, I took my dogs for a walk on the beach, and I sat in the garden. I talked to my husband, and now I feel better. And it's nice to talk to you, and thank you for asking me. So there is so much positive in life that we can find. And there are ways through, what's the James Taylor song? Shed a Little Light. It's one of my favorite songs. There is a pathway through the darkness and the mist, right? And though the body sleeps, the heart will never rest. We can deal with these things, but we have to share. We have to do things like this. We have to share and talk and support each other and tell each other how we've got through the dark. And we have to do that because aloneness, all the research says the same thing in my field. If you want to be overwhelmed by any kind of challenge, just add a good dollop of aloneness. We can't deal with anything alone. We can't deal with demons alone. We can't problem solve well alone. the lady before us, I'm sorry, I've forgotten her name. It's about togetherness. And our society hasn't recognized that, really. It's about togetherness. And, you know, deep in our souls, we know this. We know this. You know, it's about togetherness. Facing life and doing life well is about togetherness. We can't do it alone. And we've lived in a culture that for years has told us, hey, alone is the way to be. Hey, alone, you can cope with it. You're strong. You just rely on yourself. If you just rely on yourself, you're an idiot, basically. You just can't, we can't do it. We're not wired for it. We're just not wired for it. So I'm getting into these conversations. I can't even remember the questions. I just have fun answering them. That was a huge question. My God, that was a huge question. Anyway.
Well, thank you so much for answering it. And I feel very moved after listening to you. I'm sure everyone else does as well. I think that will be our final question. But I do want to just thank you all for joining us again and answering these questions. For those that we didn't get your questions to, a reminder, we will email you all with an answer from either David or Sue here. Again, thank you, Dr. Sue Johnson and David Craig and Lyanne Westie for taking the time out of their schedules and presenting to us today. I want to thank each and every one of you who joined us today. Your presence here has made this event really special. It's your engagement, your questions, and your commitment to our community that makes these gatherings so meaningful and so important. As we conclude this webinar, please know that your participation has made a significant difference, and your ongoing support to Save Your Skin and Ocular Canada is deeply appreciated. Thank you again for being part of this inspiring community, and we look forward to continuing this journey together, because as Sue really prefaced, we have to do this together, can't do it alone.
Thank you, Jasmine, very much. Thank you for inviting me, and thank you, David.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evenings and celebrate the rest of Mental Health Week until the 7th of October. Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye now. Take care. Bye-bye.